best to get everybody out before 5 tonight. um, yeah, I'll throw down that gauntlet right now. First item, is there any requests for bill introductions? Seeing none, we'll head right into our first hearing because I know Representative Proctor has some other business to attend to. So we'll start with House Bill 2036, and I'll turn to the reviser first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2036 would provide for a subtraction modification for the determination of Kansas income for amounts received as compensation for serving in the armed forces. The subtraction modification is limited to an amount not to exceed the compensation equal to a senior enlisted member of the armed forces set forth by the United States Department of Defense for the tax year. Pursuant to the bill, compensation would include all pay, bonuses, reimbursement, or compensation for serving in the armed forces. And under the bill, the armed forces would include the Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, Marine Corps, or Space Force of the United States, whether an active, reserve, or National Guard component thereof. With that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Siebers. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you again. We'll now turn to Department of Revenue for an overview on the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. I believe this bill is a bill from last year, so the estimates that we provided were for fiscal year 26, 27, and 28. We estimated that it would reduce the state general fund by $2.3 million in fiscal year 26, $7.6 million in fiscal year 27, and $7.7 million in fiscal year 28, and this was based upon 17,300 or so active duty National Guard and Reserve members.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. Do we have any breakdown? I know there was some chatter last time we were talking about this bill about the National Guard. Do we know how many of that 17,000 would apply to the National Guard?
I can tell you the number of active duty was based on 7,650, and the reserves, which would include the National Guard, is around 9,660. Okay.
Around?
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. Committee, any questions on the fiscal note? Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we know if that already includes, is that the active duty portion of that? Is that only including those that are on active duty that are still maintaining a residence in the state of Kansas, or is that all? I would assume it is, but I just want to make sure my thoughts.
I assume that it is as well, but I'm not for sure, so we can check on that for you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Kathleen. We'll now turn to our proponents, and to welcome first Representative Pat Proctor. Welcome to the Tax Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you for hearing this bill. So when I came up here to Topeka, it wasn't to work on elections, which I know is what you usually hear me talking about. It was to do something to bring Leavenworth back. Leavenworth is losing population, and I've been focused up here for the last 5 or 6 years trying to do things to keep the residents we have and get more people to come to Leavenworth. And this is an extension of a problem across the state, right? We're stagnant population. We got 60,000 unfilled jobs. We need to get people to come to Kansas. And you guys have already heard the disabled veteran property tax bill. That's a piece of that. But this is another piece of it. So I represent Leavenworth and Fort Leavenworth, and I have 10,000 residents, give or take, on Fort Leavenworth. And almost none of them are Kansas residents because there's a federal law, it's called the Servicemen Civil Relief Act, and the way it's written, you can choose to be from your home of record or you can choose to be from any state where you're stationed. But how it ends up getting implemented, because there's really no way to check where you've been stationed throughout your career at the finance office, is people can be from wherever they want. And they all pick Texas and Florida because Texas and Florida doesn't have income tax. And they can also do that for their spouses. So their spouses are also from Texas and Florida because there's no income tax there. And so what the intent of this bill is if we exempt the income tax for military service members while they're here in Kansas, I'm hoping they'll become Kansas residents and they'll stay Kansas residents the whole time that they're in the Army and the Air Force, whatever service they serve in. And just maybe it'll make them that much more likely to come back here because they've been Kansans all the time. And while they were here, we welcomed them. We, with this benefit, we encouraged them to be Kansans. And maybe it makes it just that much more likely that they'll come back. Ancillary benefits of this. They're going to get if they become Kansans, they're going to get their driver's license here. And then every time, they get their driver's license renewed, it'll be in the state of Kansas. They're going to get their car tags here. And every time they renew their car tags in whatever county they were stationed in, that county's going to get the revenue for the fees for those tags. And so there's a lot of ancillary benefits to having them be Kansans while they're here and after they leave. But the main reason, like I said, is just I want them to come back. To the fiscal note, you'll remember we had this bill in this committee 2 years ago, and we had some conversation about this. I believe that the fiscal note is $4 million because all those active duty service members, they're not paying income taxes now. So you're not losing any income taxes for those active duty service members. The only income tax that you would lose with this bill, as it's currently written, is the guard drill pay. So those guardsmen and guardswomen, when they're serving on their 1 week in a month and their 2 weeks a year, that pay is currently in this bill as would be exempted from income tax. And so that's the cost. And so if you calculate from all of the active duty pay, I would say that's probably inaccurate because those folks aren't paying taxes here now. I think I would just wrap up here, and then, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions if anybody has any. Like I said, our population is stagnant. We've got 60,000 unfilled jobs in this state. Businesses go where there are people to fill the jobs for the businesses that they need. These folks, these military folks, not only do they get whatever skill they get in the military and whatever leadership skills that they get in the military, they get great educations. A lot of them have degrees. A lot of them have advanced degrees. A lot of their spouses have degrees, have advanced degrees. They come out of the military, if they retire or if they're disabled in some way, with great medical care from TRICARE and or the veterans, VA medical benefits. And most of that medical care is not delivered on post. It's delivered on the economy because there's a lot of things that the military posts or the VA hospitals don't have. And so that's federal dollars coming into our system to basically subsidize our civilian system of healthcare with those federal dollars. And so it's really important if we can hang on to these guys and gals. It'll be really good for Kansas, and I hope that you'll support the bill.
Thank you. Are there any questions, committee? Representative Corbett.
So if they're using Texas and Florida for their residency now, and they're still living here and doing everything they want to do, would there be enough money in this bill to drag them back from or whatever? Because it sounds like they've got a pretty good thing going right now.
Yeah. The reason that they're all from Texas and Florida is because they're not paying there's no income tax in Texas and Florida. If we don't have income tax for military pay, I think that a lot of them will become Kansas residents when they come through, and then they'll just stay Kansas residents the whole time that they're in the military, because the Servicemen Civil Relief Act allows them to be from whatever state they want to be from. And a lot of, like for me, when I went back on active duty after ROTC, my first duty station after my basic course was Texas. And so Texas didn't have an income tax, so I became a Texas resident while I was there and maintained that for much of my time in the Army. I would say that if especially like Fort Riley and McConnell Air Force Base, where they've got a lot of junior soldiers. We've got some junior soldiers do their first term at Fort Leavenworth. If we don't have income tax, the personnel and finance office is going to tell them, hey, there's no income tax here. Why don't you just become a Kansas resident?
and it's a good thing. But just like you mentioned, there's probably 104 other counties that are fighting the same thing. People are leaving.
Yeah.
So I think on a more of a global picture, if we can't give them a reason for cutting property taxes or staying here or something, the whole state's going to be hurting.
Yeah, and that this goes together, in my mind, this goes together with 2005 and 434, which also provides for those folks that are disabled that property tax benefit, because that's the other thing that Texas and Florida does to hang on to their veterans, is they offer that benefit as well.
Representative Turner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your testimony, you talk about when they transition to civilian life, we want them to choose Kansas. But if they transition to civilian life and get a job in anything other than military, then they will be taxed in Kansas. We agree. So that's, as opposed to Florida and Texas, where they keep their residency, and of course, then they go back there and work, then they're not taxed for any of that stuff, correct?
Yeah, so that's absolutely correct. This doesn't do anything about after they transition. That's really, in my mind, what the disabled veteran property tax thing is for. That makes us somewhat competitive, because our income tax relatively is not so high. It's the property tax that drives veterans to Florida and Texas.
Because military retirement isn't taxed.
Yeah, military retirement is not currently taxed. Disability is not currently taxed. And a lot of veterans, when they retire from the military, if they do retire, they take jobs just that they want to do. Like there are a lot of school teachers, a lot of college professors that continue to serve in that way because money's not quite as big a concern for them because they're getting that retirement and that disability.
Right, but here in yeah, that's why I was going to say.
Yeah.
But if they choose that,
Yeah,
like you,
that
then
is
it would
one
be
point.
taxed.
I mean, if you would like to amend the bill, Representative, I concur.
No, I was just trying to contrast the attractiveness of Texas.
But it is a great point. It's, you know, and I've had this conversation with the veteran service officers from the VFW and the American Legion. They're the guys that sit down with these service members and go through with them all the stuff so they can do their claims for their VA benefits, and they have the same conversation over and over again. The service member's like, hey, what's the best place to live in for money? And they've got a big chart. It's got a bunch of green and red gumballs, and we're all red gumballs all the way down. So that's what I'm trying to do, is turn some of those gumballs green.
Any further questions, committee? Since you are familiar with elections, I'm assuming that if they are residents of Kansas, they will become voters in Kansas as well.
That is their prerogative. They could do that. The residency requirements are separate from voting requirements because of the UACAVA. There's lots overseas and uniform voters. They have different rules for registration, so they can register at their duty station, at their home of record, or at their kind of tax-paying place. And so they may or may not change the registration to here, but that's a possibility.
Okay, I did not know that.
It certainly raised my turnout, because right now half of my district doesn't vote in my district. I've also got the U.S. Penitentiary with 1,400 guests of the federal government that don't vote either, so.
All right, seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, Representative Butler, do you want to step up, or you can do it from right there if you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of HB 2036. I'd like to address just a simple question in my testimony. Why would it benefit Kansas to allow Kansas residents serving on active duty anywhere in the world to receive their pay, their military pay, tax-free? You know, Kansas has always taken pride in the men and women who volunteer to defend our nation, providing a state income tax exemption on active duty military pay as a meaningful way to demonstrate that appreciation. We are going to, if we work this bill, we will submit an amendment to the bill to discuss who that, will change up who would be covered under this just a little bit when we get to that. Service members often have the option to claim residency in another state when they're stationed across the country or around the world. I can give you my personal story about that. And when I graduated from ROTC at Wichita State University, Within a month, I was assigned to Fort Sam Houston, San Antonio, Texas. Within the first week at school in San Antonio, Texas, I was told, would you like to become a state of Texas resident? And I said, why? And they said, you won't pay state taxes down here. So guess what I did? I went straight to the personnel office, changed my residency to the state of Texas. And so for the rest of my career, I never paid taxes on the state taxes. When I retired and came back to the state of Kansas upon retirement, I ended up paying state taxes. But while I was here, even my last duty assignment in Kansas City with the recruiting command, I did not pay taxes in the state of Kansas because I was a Texas resident, although my family lived here in Kansas. So if Kansas exempts active duty military pay from the state income tax, it encourages service members to maintain Kansas as their legal residency. Maintaining residency keeps them connected with Kansas communities and civic life, including the ability to vote should they decide to absentee from anywhere around the world. And this policy also increases the likelihood that those service members will return to Kansas after their military careers. And veterans, when they do come back, they often bring back leadership experience, technical skills, and federal retirement income. They buy homes, start businesses, raise families, and strengthen local communities. So by supporting our service members in this way also reinforces Kansas' reputation as a military-friendly state. That reputation benefits installations such as Fort Riley, Fort Leavenworth, and McConnell Air Force Base, and helps sustain the defense-related jobs and economic activity tied to those facilities. While the policy may reduce a modest amount of state income tax revenue in the short term, the long-term benefits, retaining residents, attracting veterans, and strengthening our military community can more offset that loss through economic growth and population stability. So in short, exempting active duty military pay from Kansas income tax helps keep Kansas residents connected to their home state, encourages veterans to return after their service, supports our military installations, and demonstrates genuine appreciation for those who serve. Thank you for your time and consideration of HB 2036, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you again. Next, I'd like to welcome Mike Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Mike Kelly. I'm the president of the Kansas Council of Chapters of Military Officers Association of America, and we advocate for the entire military community. If you look at the 50 states plus the District of Columbia, those 51 jurisdictions, 43 of them offer some sort of break to active service members on their income tax liability. Kansas is one that does not, with one small exception. Kansas does not currently tax reenlistment bonuses or retention bonuses. So there is that one small income subtraction that Kansas currently grants, but we're basically in the bottom 7 of all the jurisdictions that tax. And I'm talking about income tax now, I'm not talking about other legs of taxation. So we would welcome any change that would give active service members some sort of income tax break on their military pay. So we support this bill. I don't know exactly how the amendments are going to go out, but any movement forward in giving a tax break to any currently serving military members, we're for it. And you know, we'd like the whole pie, but if we can only get part of the pie, we'll take a slice. Last thing, Mr. Chairman, you asked a question about how many are in the Guard. I hit my phone with that, and the artificial intelligence agent came back and said 6,691. I'll caution everyone that there's assigned, which is the actual number in uniform, and then there's authorized. So a formation may be authorized 1,000 soldiers, and they only have 942 on duty. So there's authorized and assigned. I'm pretty sure that's the assigned number, because the numbers I've seen in the past for the National Guard strength, which would be the authorized, is around 7,000. So if they have 6,691 currently in uniform against an authorization of 7,000, that's That's pretty good staffing there. Sir, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, any questions? Seeing none? Thank you,
sir.
Ken. Oh, did you? Good, okay. That's all that I show appearing as a proponent on House Bill 2036. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of House Bill 2036? Seeing none, is there any neutral or opposing testimony? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next hearing, informational hearing on Senate Bill 534. We don't have this bill in committee, so this isn't an official hearing. I'm going to handle this kind of like we would an interim committee. Going to have the reviser get up and kind of explain the bill, and then we have looks like 3 people that are going to provide us some comments on that. It's not necessarily considered proponent or opponent testimony. We'll just have a general discussion. This bill came through the Senate pretty late, and they're having a hearing on it tomorrow. So I wanted us to have a chance to take a look at it. It's pretty significant change in the tax policy. So I'll turn it to the reviser to take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 534 would impose a nameplate capacity tax and a production tax upon certain wind farms and solar facilities. It would credit these taxes to a new property tax relief fund. It would create the property tax relief fund, and it would also decrease the statewide property tax levy for schools. Under sections 1 through 3 of the bill, it would establish and provide for the nameplate capacity tax for wind farms or solar facilities, which would equal $4 per kilowatt multiplied by the nameplate capacity of the renewable energy facility. These taxes would go into effect commencing in the year of 2027, so next calendar year. The tax would be due and payable on or before February 1st of the following year. And like I said, taxes collected would be credited to the property tax relief fund. There would be a corresponding excise tax upon the production of electricity in the state that uses a renewable energy facility at the rate of I've written it down incorrectly on my notes. 0.001 cent. So actually, I have it right. 0.001 cent. I'm just not used to seeing that number per kilowatt hour of electricity produced by the renewable energy facility during the calendar year. Again, this tax would go into effect commencing with tax year 2027, and taxes collected would be credited to the property tax relief fund. Under the bill, the nameplate capacity tax and the excise tax would be limited to those facilities with a capacity of at least 5,000 kilowatts. Section 4 would establish the property tax relief fund in the state treasury to be administered by the treasurer. The bill would state that expenditures from this fund are limited for purposes of the state school district finance fund, reductions of the property taxes levied by school districts. Monies in the property tax relief fund will be transferred to the state school district finance fund by the 15th of each month. And then lastly, Section 5 would decrease currently the 20 mills required to be levied by a school district to 19.5 mills for school years 2027 through 2028 and for school year 2028 through 2029. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Adam. As I look at those last few sections, I think section 4 and 5, so we've got money that is generated from these new proposals that go into the fund, but the actual buy down of the mill levy is a hard number. It's going from 20 to 19.5. I'm assuming that's kind of intended to offset, but looks like the money just goes into the school district finance fund and then, or from the property tax relief fund and then directly into the school district finance fund.
Yes, you're correct. That's how I read it too. It does mention the
I guess my question is, if there's more money than would relate to a half a mil, does it it doesn't look like it buys the mill levy down further. It would just be more money to the school district finance fund?
That is correct. There's no formula that actually adjusts it, so it's a hard 0.5 mil decrease at this point.
Okay. All right, committee, any questions? Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You almost asked my question, but I think, so this is the place that reduces the school tax levy. I mean, we don't have it reduced anywhere else. Is that correct?
I mean,
This is the vehicle to reduce
correct.
the
yeah,
mill levy.
Correct.
Okay,
There is no automatic formula that would.
just trying to understand. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I know we've got several bills floating around, other bills that do the same thing, but yeah, this is another one. Representative Sanders?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So forgive my ignorance, but I'm not familiar with the phrase nameplate capacity tax. What exactly is that?
Well, I'm no means an expert in this. All these windmills and solar have a capacity to generate so much electricity. And so what I understand is they get a nameplate, is what they call, they're able to generate so much electricity, and the tax is based on the ability to generate the electricity of that particular item.
Yeah, and I know our other conferees would be able to answer that too, being involved in the industry. This is kind of a spinoff of what we had discussed in the interim committee. We had several meetings regarding the renewable energy generation, and if there's a different methodology that we should be taxing that on. And I think this bill, it was introduced by Senator Tyson in the Senate. I think it kind of came out of that discussion somewhat. But Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You were saying that it would drop a half a mil for 2 years. That's a lot of money, isn't it? I mean, that's if you're talking about a half a mil throughout the whole state, aren't we talking about a pretty good sum of money?
I think our current 1 mil, our currently in the levy is about $46 million, or roughly. So a half a mil would be about $23 million.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Siebers. We will first, like I said, we have them listed as proponents and opponents, but if you want to opine on the your position on the bill, support or opposition, that's fine. But this is really generally for a general discussion. But I'd like to welcome first Claudia Hissong.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony and opine on the policy points before us. I am Claudia Hissong with Kansas Farm Bureau, so representing farmers and ranchers across our state. So appreciate the opportunity to provide some policy concepts for you to think through as we start looking at property tax relief and what that could look like. So Kansas has abundant natural resources, especially when wind and sunshine and wide open spaces, and it really is a great formula to host renewable energy projects within our state. It has been a major target for a lot of new development coming into our state. So furthermore, the Southwest Power Pool shows that Kansas is the center of rapidly expansion of renewable energy generation and transmission lines associated with those projects across the region, showing that Kansas is a key player and holds a very important role in powering the broader regional grid. So for several years, our members have discussed the rapid growth of renewable energy projects and the associated transmission build out across the state. A consistent question among our members that they've grappled with is, how does Kansas benefit when energy generated here is delivered elsewhere? So that has been a concern that has been heightened among our membership as large merchant transmission lines move Kansas-generated electricity outside of the state to outside markets. And so through our grassroots policy development process, our members have thought about what that policy question is and what that could look like. And they adopted a policy supporting an electric energy generation fee to help cover transmission costs and lower rates for Kansas consumers. Our members believe that the state and the communities that host these projects and this infrastructure should see tangible benefits of that. And as this committee well knows, our members also heavily value broad-based property tax relief. So we think the policy point in front of you today combines both of those policy priorities and is an opportunity to reduce property taxes for Kansans. As we think about how these policy points can be blended in the Senate Bill 534 that is going to be heard in the Senate committee tomorrow, it does blend those 2 points, and it brings renewable energy facilities onto the tax rolls through an excise tax, which is a simple, predictable, and it's based on clear capacity and production data. It is really the benefit of doing business in Kansas, which we think that is a great summation of what this policy question is. So, and that with that excise tax, it avoids the complex and potentially contentious appraisal process for, as we think about aging turbines, large solar arrays. Kansas is already a net exporter of energy with the SPP data showing significant wind generation already flowing to other states, with additional generation coming on into the state within the next few years. This bill also aligns it with other, this policy point with other SPP states that have also grappled with what does the taxation of renewables look like for their state. So when we look at other SPP states, they've already thought through what is the taxation for these. So it would bring us in line with some other SPP states that have also contemplated this. So our bottom line from a Kansas Farm Bureau perspective, we think that this policy concept ensures that natural resources of our state and the use of our land for energy generation produces a direct financial benefit to the Kansans who live here. And we appreciate all the work that this body has done to think about property tax for our citizens and provide that meaningful property tax relief. We know a part of that is revenue and where it's going to come from. So as you continue to think through what that, how to provide that property tax relief, we think this is a great part of that conversation. And we understand that there might be other ideas out there, but we think this really gets the conversation started. So we appreciate the time to provide those comments and focus on the policy that our members have brought forward, and we appreciate all this committee's done to think about property tax relief for all citizens.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, are there any questions? Representative Francis.
So is this tax that you're imposing, is it going to be in place of the existing payment in lieu of tax agreements and property tax that is supposed to come on after the exemption and their current income tax? Will it replace those, or is it in addition?
I would look to the revisor to confirm, but I believe it is in addition, so I think that's a great policy concept for this committee to think through of what that taxation structure should look like.
So your position is that it's in addition to those taxes?
Our members' positions is they would look at an energy generation fee. They did not touch the current removing pilots, but they do feel that it should benefit local communities. So whether that is through property tax reduction or putting them on the property tax rolls sooner, but they have not went as far to say we would pick this format over another.
And then this doesn't put any such tax on solar or the coal plant at Holcomb or any of our other energy generation at this time. It just kind of sets a precedent for that possibly.
It would do solar, yes.
It would do solar?
Yes,
Okay.
it is for wind and solar.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
other
you.
generation types are exempt, are not included in this.
Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think Adam said they'll drop a $500,000 for the next 2 years. Why doesn't it just keep going?
I think that's a great question as well. As the chairman was talking about, if there could be a way to make sure it all goes directly to a buy down of the mills, I think that would make a lot of sense as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's great having it for 2 years, but like I say, year 3, year 4, because that's exactly what we need, so thank you.
I might have the revisor just address that. I know when we typically renew that 20 mills, it's not permanent. We only do it on a 2-year cycle, and I think that has something to do with the court decision or something about on education funding, but it is a 2-year cycle. We renew that every 2 years, so that's probably why this was put in place for 2 years, I would assume.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, that's correct. For the property tax levy is, for schools is renewed every 2 years. There's, I believe, an attorney general opinion going back several decades. It has to deal with a constitutional provision dealing with budgeting and property tax levies. So that's why it's essentially reauthorized every 2 years, which has been the common practice.
Any further questions, committee? All right, seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome Jackie. I'm going to call her Newland. I would probably mess up that last name now, but welcome to committee.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee, for allowing me to be here to testify in front of you today. It is Jackie Garagiola, and so if you're a baseball fan, Joe Garagiola is usually the one everyone knows, especially if you're a fan of the New York teams. But so I am with the Kansas Livestock Association. I am the Director of Legal and Government Affairs there, and I really appreciate the opportunity to just, be a part of the informational hearing on SB 534. As a general concept, we are supportive of broad-based property tax relief. Our KLA policy supports increased reliance on income tax and other non-property tax sources to form government. To fund government. And so we believe that reducing the statewide mill levy is the most effective means for the state legislature, you all, to do that. You've heard that testimony probably numerous times within this committee on other bills that have attempted to do the same thing. And so that's probably where our policy lies on this. I will say, Mr. Chair, you stole my thunder. The one piece that I was going to really focus on here is that we do believe that the taxes generated from this excise tax will likely be higher than that 0.5 mills that is currently reduced down from the mill levy. We would just ask, and this was touched on a little bit earlier, that the legislature consider inserting a formula within there to ensure that the revenue raised from these new taxes would be dedicated to reducing the school district levy. This formula would just ensure that funds are used for property tax relief, and that's what our policy would really support. So with that, that's probably the bulk of my testimony, but I am happy to stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, any questions? I think everybody wants to get out by 5 tonight. Thank you again. Next, I'd like to welcome Kimberly Swati.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Genscher Swati, and I do appreciate the opportunity to be before you all this afternoon. If it's okay with you, I'd like to spend a little bit of time walking through Senate Bill 534, but also specifically talking for those of you that didn't have the opportunity to serve on this special Committee on Taxation this summer or this fall, to walk through the various proposals that were put forth by that particular committee. Well, not really proposals, but the concepts that other states have in place as it relates to taxing wind and solar. So if that's okay. And then I would love to have you all ask questions and walk through some things. So I just first and foremost want to put it out there that on behalf of the Advanced Power Alliance, we certainly appreciate the informational hearing and conversation that we get to have today on this topic. We also very much, at our core, we are partners with our communities that host wind farms and solar projects and other forms of generation. Our membership, we build wind, solar, geothermal, we build natural gas, we build, which is thermal generation. Some of our members are in battery storage, some of them are also in nuclear. So we run the full gamut, and our member companies, which are representatives of some of the largest energy companies in the world, but also some great local homegrown developers as well. At their core, they're interested in being good, strong community partners and good partners with the state. And we believe that we have been that for the last 26 years in our existence in Kansas. And part of that partnership is making sure that we are investing, bless you, in local communities and with our local landowners. That's really important. So I have some data points to share with you about that can help speak to this notion about making sure that our communities are strong and thriving. So, we appreciate very much that the legislature is having not just this session, but for many sessions, conversations about how do we provide property tax relief, and not just in the policy, but actual dollars to communities. And we recognize that the drumbeat continues to grow among all Kansans for broad-based property tax relief. And so we are here to partner with you all in that conversation. Senate Bill 534, we'll start with that conversation. First of all, it is not just a prospective bill. If this was just a prospective bill and we were just talking about implementing the policy put forth in 534, which I'll explain a little bit more, that would be a very different conversation than the conversation that the legislature is going to have starting tomorrow morning in the Senate, well, I guess actually starting now, but it's starting tomorrow morning in the Senate Tax Committee. We, as an industry, have always believed in investing in our communities. As I've said, there is no legislation that requires when a wind farm or a solar project or a coal facility or a natural gas facility or insert any other business, there's no legislation that requires a donation agreement to be made to a community. But from the beginning, from the very first wind farm that came online in the state of Kansas in Montezuma, we said, we want to be a strong community partner. Let's do a donation agreement to the community so we can make sure that even though we have a property tax exemption, that we are still giving to the community. And also, let's negotiate a road maintenance agreement, because we know that by coming in and building a project, we are going to have an impact on the roads. So let's do that road maintenance agreement as well. So just at the outset, nothing mandatory, nothing required by state statute, but voluntary agreements. So Senate Bill 534, if you've had the opportunity to read it, it requires that the state of Kansas create a $4,000 a megawatt hour or megawatt nameplate capacity tax. So Representative Saunders, to your question, what is the nameplate capacity? Every form of generation has a nameplate capacity. That's kind of like saying, on the best case scenario, my generation facility, whether it's Wolf Creek or a natural gas facility or a wind farm, is going to can produce X. It's my nameplate capacity. So roughly a 200 megawatt wind farm or a 300 megawatt wind farm should be producing 300 megawatts of generation. So that's what that nameplate capacity tax is. So it provides a tax for each megawatt associated with the project. So for example, in Kansas, for a 300 megawatt wind farm that's in operation in the state, that's already in operation or would look to come online in Kansas, just to do business in the state, just to operate in the state, a 300 megawatt wind farm every year would have to pay $1.2 million to the state. And for those projects that are already operating, those are fixed price contracts. There is no ability to change what is embedded in that cost. So who absorbs that new, every year, $1.2 million nameplate capacity tax? The ratepayer does. So that's the nameplate capacity tax. And then there is an excise tax on production. So however much your project produces, then you're going to be taxed on that production. That both concepts are completely fine to put in place from a policy standpoint. Ideally, and in most other cases, those policies are put in place at the outset of the industry or before there is a critical mass of projects in the state. So for example, Nebraska has a nameplate capacity tax. It's around $3,568. That was installed in 2010. There was, if 2 or 3 wind farms online in 2010. And so for all future generation projects going forward, it was not retroactive, it was forward-looking. For all new projects coming online, everyone knew that they would need to embed that $3,568 into the price of their power. The excise tax, the same thing. So those policy decisions were made at the early stages of the industry, not 26 years in. So that's why one of the key points, I think that one of our key concerns is we now have 50 operating wind farms and solar projects in the state generating 10,000 megawatts of the lowest cost power that can be found in the state. And the nameplate capacity tax and the excise tax will now have to apply to all of those existing assets, not just the ones in the future. In the future, again, we can account for that. We can attribute for that in our final PPA price. We cannot go back and account for that. And so what that means is under Senate Bill 534, this bill would raise about $80 to $100 million a year in new revenue for the state of Kansas, which is sizable. What that really means is it's an $80 to $100 million a year increase in your electric rate. So rate cases that the utilities have, whether you're an electric utility or a natural gas utility, that rate case might be $2 million or $6 million or even $20 million. And that is for new rates to go into effect forward-looking. And those rate cases are 9-month at least quasi-judicial deliberative processes where you can have interveners, you have settlement hearings, you have evidence, you have tremendous amounts of conversation and paperwork and meetings and hearings to determine what actually is what we call just and reasonable, what actually should go into the rates going forward. Senate Bill 534 is not going to have that type of very thorough vetting, that evidence-based decision-making, and would raise annually between $80 million to $100 million a year. So then the other issue I want to touch on is in other states, and specifically we'll talk about the 3 states that were mentioned, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Wyoming. Those states that have a nameplate tax or an excise tax or both, either the funding is directly sent back to the local government, the communities where these projects are hosted, or there's a cost share, 60-40 between the state and, again, the local governments where the projects are hosted. Under Senate Bill 534, all of the revenue generated goes to the state. That's a policy decision for you all to make, but it feels like the locals who host projects should have the opportunity to ensure that revenue is directed back their way. If it's okay, I'd like to spend a moment just to talk about what was discussed in that interim committee as it relates to Nebraska, our neighbor to the north, South Dakota, our neighbor a little further to the north, and then Wyoming. And our neighbors to the south do not have, Texas and Oklahoma, they do not have any policies like this in place. Missouri doesn't as well. And Texas and Oklahoma are our main competitors, if you will. Nebraska, South Dakota, and Wyoming have a third of the amount of energy produced as we do in Kansas. So we talked a little bit about the Kansas proposal and that it's the essentially $4,000 a megawatt hour capacity tax and then the excise tax as well on production. Nebraska has just a nameplate capacity tax, and as I mentioned, it's around $3,500. That nameplate capacity tax is in lieu of any property tax. That in Nebraska brings in roughly $32 million a year, and that is all directed back toward the local government. So the state collects it, it's all sent back to the local government. That's Nebraska, and they have roughly 3,000 megawatts of operating wind. Wyoming, and this bill looks a little bit like Wyoming. Wyoming has a production tax, which is what we're calling the excise tax. And their production tax is in addition to property tax. So they are requiring both. They have a $1 per megawatt hour production tax credit. Ours is $4,000. And their $1 per megawatt hour production tax credit, there is then no property tax for the first 3 years. They have a $5 per megawatt hour tax for solar, and there is no operating solar in their state. In Wyoming's case, the revenue that's generated, there is a tax on nuclear, and nuclear actually brings in the majority of their income, and so they bring in $75.8 million a year, Wyoming does. 46 of that 78.5 comes from nuclear. 29 million comes from wind, and that is a 60-40 cost share. So 60% goes to the local government. 40% goes to the local government, 60% goes to the state. And then South Dakota has the nameplate capacity tax, and they have a production tax, and those are all in lieu of any property tax. And so South Dakota, again, they have projects because they implemented their policy after some wind farms had come online. They have one rate for wind farms that were online prior to the effective date of their act, which was in 2015, and a slightly different rate, a slightly lesser rate, actually, for projects that came online after 2015. And solar in their state has a uniform rate. And then all facilities in South Dakota pay a nameplate capacity tax. Theirs is $3 a kilowatt hour. Their local distribution is always split in South Dakota, and it's split 50% to schools, 35% to the county, and then 15% specifically back to the local township. In South Dakota, they bring in roughly $40 million, $40.8 million. 72 million of that 40 million comes from wind, and 13 of that comes, that's from the nameplate tax, and then 13 is from capacity. And there's really nothing from solar. So in Kansas, just for perspective, I just want to break that down, we have roughly 10,000 megawatts of installed capacity, roughly 3 times all of those states. That will bring in roughly $40 million a year to the state. They're calling it a privilege tax, as it's written in the bill for the privilege to do business in Kansas. The excise tax, we believe, will bring in somewhere between $35 to $40 million a year. We don't know exactly how much revenue will be lost due to lost production tax credit. Now, in Kansas, projects starting January 1 of 2017 have a 10-year property tax exemption. So in 8 months, these projects are going to come onto the tax rolls. So in 8 months, some of these projects that are in operation today in Kansas under this bill will pay property tax to the county. They will pay a nameplate capacity tax, and they will pay an excise tax. That is totally different than any other tax structure in the United States. And again, all of the money is funneled to the state. There are projects in the state of Kansas that were built prior to the state moving to the 10-year exemption, which is a policy that we supported and we brought to the state. We actually brought to the state at the same time language that removed us from the ability to use commercial machinery and industrial tax exemption. So we won't ever use CMIE. We do have the 10-year exemption, as does all form of electric generation in the state, whether you're a coal plant, nuclear, natural gas, everyone has a 10-year property tax exemption. Parity, which was a key point for that special committee. They wanted parity in taxation among all forms of generation. But prior to the enactment, that change in 2015, there were projects that were online that do have a lifetime exemption. And they would still be subject to the nameplate tax and the excise tax. And they the donation agreement that goes alongside that project would probably change, I would say, based on traditionally what we've seen in Kansas. I will say there has been talk about tangible benefit to the state. This industry every year already is providing $32.7 million annually in property tax and then state and local taxes. $32 million. So roughly what is paid in South Dakota. We're also investing in drought-proof landowner leases. $71.1 million goes to Kansas farmers and ranchers every year in lease payments. On average, that amount bounces around, for each dollar that bounces around a Kansas community 7 times before it leaves. So these are very direct and tangible benefits. There's a lot more we could talk about, but I really wanted to focus on the differences between 534 vis-a-vis the 3 other states that were used as kind of a barometer for other tax policy. And again, I want to make sure that everyone understands that we are not opposed to looking at different tax structures for wind and solar, but also for all forms of generation, but it needs to be prospective. A backward-looking tax policy is very difficult and tantamount to a large rate increase. With that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Representative Helgerson.
Yes, Representative, thank you for the question. As a general rule in utility rate making, we talk about just and fair, reasonable rates. So just and fair, it sounds like Justin, just and fair, reasonable rates.
Fair. Let me see if I understand this, because I didn't have the privilege of being on the committee. We have encouraged industries such as yours that you're referring, or the nuclear energy, or what was that thing we passed last year, that box, you know, $17 million.
Battery storage.
Huh?
Battery storage.
Battery storage. We encourage those industries to occur in Kansas, and then we think about taking them back because they're locked in to Kansas, and we can raise the taxes on them because they're captive here, and you can't get away as easy, so then it'll get passed on in some other way. Is that about right? Not that you don't have to answer. You haven't. Is this legal? If I was in your position, I would have the best attorney in the United States going, we made some deals, we made some agreements, and we are going to sue the state of Kansas because you can't put on these kind of fees. And suddenly put us out to business.
So, Representative, if I might, that's a very good question. And again, I want to make sure the committee understands that the industry isn't opposed, that if going forward we want to have a conversation about whether it's a nameplate tax or an excise tax in lieu of taxes, we can talk about all of those things for projects going forward. But when we're talking about opening up the contracts of 50 operating assets in the state of Kansas, I can tell you this bill was revealed Tuesday evening at 8:10 p.m. and within the hour, many of the large hedge funds and private equity funds that all have invested in the state of Kansas vis-a-vis these projects already had their legal teams reviewing their contracts because they don't know if this kind of retroactive tax would be allowable, would be legal. So yes, those are all questions that are being reviewed. Going forward is a different conversation.
Totally understand. And I assume it would be for all those other industries that we've put together that have been working with the legislature and trying to build our economy. I assume that they'd have the same group of attorneys trying to figure out if it's legal or not. But prospective is totally different.
Totally different, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Kahar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You'd mentioned that if the tax were to be imposed, then it would likely just be an increase, a pass-through increase to the ratepayers. Could you give us an idea of what percentage of the ratepayers are Kansans and how many are out of state?
Sure, absolutely. So it's a really good question. So for projects that are, for example, Kansas City Board of Public Utilities owns a couple of wind farms or has ownership in or interest in a couple of different wind farms and portions of solar farms. So for KCBPU, it's roughly a $2.5 million immediate increase in rates without going through the rate case process. So it's a little difficult to say exactly how much stays in state versus goes out of state. All of our Kansas utilities, whether you're a municipal utility, Evergy, Liberty, the electric co-ops are owners or have invested in, through a power purchase agreement, wind and solar in the state. There are many corporate businesses that operate in the state of Kansas that are owners or have signed PPAs. Many of our universities and Regents institutions have signed PPAs. So the vast majority of the power does stay within the state, but the vast majority. But we are also part of the SPP region, the Southwest Power Pool region. And so when power is not used in state locally, then it is sent into the marketplace. And as a general rule, Kansas wind is the lowest cost power that exists, so it typically always sets the market for the lowest cost. So from an import-export, Kansas was historically a net energy exporter. We lost that status in the 1990s, so the legislature did a lot to incent the ability to export power again through biofuels and also through the property tax exemption for wind and solar. We have since regained that net exporter status of all types of energy, largely because of the SPP marketplace. So we are exporting our thermal, we are exporting our nuclear, we do at times export our wind, and we really, until the last year, didn't really have any solar, but we do have a little bit of solar now. So the vast majority of our power stays within state, and then what's not used domestically is part of the SPP marketplace and is used within that regional market.
Any further questions, committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you again for your testimony. That's all that we had appearing on the briefing or informational hearing, whatever you want to call it, on Senate Bill 534. Did I miss anybody? Is there anyone else that wished to speak? Okay, seeing none. Like I said, this is a bill that's having a hearing in the Senate on the chance that it does come across in conference. I just wanted to have the opportunity to have a little bit of a discussion in the House Tax Committee on the policy. Committee, I did want to take some time and take a look at the bill that we heard yesterday, 2797. It was the bill on penny rounding, and I might turn to the revisor. If we need an overview on the bill, we just heard it yesterday. If not, I might see no objection. I think we'll move right on to taking a look at the bill. And I had a couple of amendments prepared. Some of the proponents, the Kansas Chamber, and then the Bankers Association had made a few small suggestions. I'd asked to run the cash transaction amendment first, please. Okay, it looks like everybody's had a chance to get a copy of that at this point. If you remember, the Kansas Bankers Association requested a small clarification to define cash transactions in addition to, retail purchases of goods and services. They wanted this to make sure all the banks were covered with any transactions that could happen at their level. Not necessarily a retail purchase, but just a transaction at the financial institution. So I'd look for a second if there's a second. Representative Helgerson, any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and make a motion or move my amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Anyone wishing to be recorded? Motion carries. All right. The other one was from the Kansas Chamber and it handled a mixed tender transaction. All right. Again, it looks like everybody's had a chance to take a look at the copy. If you remember, the Kansas Chamber testimony asked for just additional clarification on mixed tender. I had asked the question when the conferee was up is how often does this happen? And I got to thinking, well, if somebody uses a gift card, they're using a card for the transaction, but it's only got a limited amount. So the remaining balance of the transaction could be remitted in cash. So this probably happens more frequently than I was originally thinking when we talked about this or the request was made. So this was the language that had been proposed just to provide some clarification on that. So that's my amendment. A second from Representative Helgerson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll move my motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Anyone wishing to be recorded? Okay. All right, motion carries. Any further discussion or amendments on the bill? Representative Kessler?
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was actually thinking about this last night a little bit. We had, I believe it was Brian that was testifying that he had a kind of a medium-sized customer that was talking, and that customer was rounding down. But over time, over the year, that number came to like $60,000. I mean, that was kind of sizable. Since we're mandating that a retailer rounds up and rounds down, do we give them a pass with the Department of Revenue as far as reporting this money? Anybody that's been through tax audits understand, I mean, you can go through bank records and you can go through your point of sale detail. They definitely prefer to go through your point of sale detail. This won't be recorded in point of sale detail. It will show up in bank records, but that's not typically what they use. If there's a $60,000 swing, I don't care if it's more money or less money. How do we account for that as far as revenue goes? Is that free money, free tax money, tax-free money? I don't know how to say that.
And I don't
because
know.
you have to understand that a lot of point of sales that our small businesses use can't do this. So it won't be recorded anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone from the department wants to address that, but and that was one of the reasons when I originally thought of this policy, I would adopt a round down, and then they would be able to keep track of that difference if they wanted to, and then we would add a line to the sales tax form to where they could claim, they could essentially balance to the penny at that point. You could track every single penny. Changes would have to be made to the point of sale to account for what was actually received versus what was actually due. But I don't think there's nothing in this bill that addresses that.
Yeah, that was kind of my point. I mean, it's not every retailer can program this in their point of sale. Like I was saying yesterday, I have multiple different systems that can only do certain things. Some can do all of it, and some can do one part of it, and other ones can do one other part of it. But all of them can't do this or what you're talking about automatically. So without applying it to all transactions or multiple things like that. But I was just kind of thinking at $60,000 on that medium-sized company, that's quite a lot of money that is going to be going unreported. Either way, I mean, it's going to be a loss, going to be maybe it balances out somewhere in there. I doubt it, but I mean, it could possibly. But I mean, if we can get hold of some tax-free money, I'm good.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we've been talking about this at the NCSL task force that I'm on for over a year, and we have no conclusions yet because of that simple fact. It's very hard to create the proper solution that works for everybody.
That's why I think it's best left up to the retailer how they want to handle that situation, and not a mandate from us, from the state, a state mandate on here's how you have to do it. Whether you're capable of doing it or not, electronically, or a clerk standing in front of the register has to do it in their head, or whatever that looks like. I'm just saying it's really difficult to account for that money. So, and I would assume that it would take. I mean, maybe there's some grace in the audits, but I've been through these audits, and there's very little grace. But I'm just saying, anytime we're dealing with something that's unaccountable, even if it's only $60,000 a year, or $8,000 a year, or $68 a year, everything needs to be accounted for. And I just don't think that a state mandate on how every retailer in the state has to do something is probably a good idea.
Representative Sawyer?
I was going to say, if you follow the mandate, you got 4 numbers where you round up and 4 you round down. So at least in theory, over time, it should just balance out. I mean, we should have that 60,000. They have that 60,000 because they're rounding down all the time. But if you round half up and half down, it should balance out over time.
Mr. Chair, thanks. Yeah, in a perfect world, right? And we don't live in a perfect world, I promise you that.
Yeah, and that has been a lot of the discussion at the national level since the penny production was stopped, is how do you balance to the exact penny? And most of the discussion has been regarding the point of sale systems, what kind of updates it would have to be made to track those 1 and 2 cents when you did round up and down. So completely see your point on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the process is fine. I mean, I've talked to retailers, actually not just in Kansas, but kind of across the board. They're all doing something different, right? I mean, so when they have to round up, just to try to ease the sting on the customer from having to tell the customer, hey, sorry, I got to round up 3 cents or whatever it is. They're clearly marked all over their store. All that money goes to a nonprofit, right? So any money that goes up, they put that off to the side, because it's not accounted for anyway. But all that money goes to a non-for-profit somewhere, and they designate who that money goes for and stuff. But I mean, my point is, there's different ways that retailers handle this. There's different ways retailers look at this. And it bothers me anytime that we are going to mandate something from a retailer to do something that's unaccountable, in most cases, for small business. And it kind of conflicts with what our Department of Revenue kind of does. I just think it's I don't know. I think there's going to be some unintended consequences there, and it's going to come out as soon as they start getting their sales and use tax audits. I promise.
Representative Corbett?
Thank you, Chairman. And kind of a follow-up on that, there's probably 30 or 40,000 retailers in the state collecting sales tax, and they have no compensation for it. But if you miss or you're off $5 or $10, or whatever it is, you seem to get a penalty pretty quick. So it's not, maybe not so much part of this penny bill, but in the whole circle of things, there's a lot of retailers that's kind of got they'll have not their butt on their line, but it's just something to watch. So none of them kind of get smacked before this gets sometime. That's all I'm saying.
Representative Francis?
I thought I'd heard some testimony that said in some places people were being sued about that. I don't think that's a big problem in Kansas, but that also people kind of wanted guidance from the state. I was just wondering if we changed the shalls to mays, it would give cover for people if they followed a certain deal. I don't know if that would make them a little bit more protected if there was a lawsuit or something. Anyway, it's a thought. Yeah, Mr. Chair, would you mind if I'd see if Kathleen had any thoughts about changing the shalls to may, if that helps with the problem any?
Does that make it too
a
vague?
guidance more than a law that you have to follow? I don't know. She's going, please no. That's all right. I can read the body language that you don't want to go up there.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I think that is a policy decision for you. So we'll do whatever the will of the body is.
If we change it to May, does that still give the department enough guidance on legislative intent?
I believe it gives us guidance. I don't know that the retailers will abide by that, so.
Right, okay. Representative Helgerson?
Being a retailer, but who deals primarily with checks and very little cash payments, but who's had a lot of dealings with the Department of Revenue and the IRS.
Oh, here it comes.
I think you do it one way or the other. You don't give it a may. We leave it up to the retailers, or we say this is what the law is, and go with it one way or the other. And I totally understand and appreciate the difficulty it may be in going through a period of no pennies and how do they handle it. But we're going to be forced to deal with it one way or the other.
You know, y'all thought it was a joke, but I stand by my original comment. This bill doesn't make sense, so. And we don't have to take action on this. If we want to continue this discussion, if we want to look at further amendments, we can certainly do that. But Representative Corbett?
Would you entertain a conceptual motion just to change it from shall to may?
Yep, I don't know how many different places we have shalls versus may, but if the reviser understands the intent of the motion, that motion is in order.
Okay.
So are you making that motion then?
I'm making that motion then.
Okay, do we have a second? Representative Kessler for a second. So Representative Corbett, if I don't want to oversimplify this, but you're wanting to change the mandates of shall anywhere that's found to mandate this, how they handle this surrounding transactions to may.
Correct.
Okay. Is there any questions on the amendment? Okay. Representative Helgerson?
My good friend who made the motion and my good friend who sits to my right, we don't do it with any other taxes. You may pay your taxes or you shall pay your taxes. You know, either leave it up to the retailer and say, we're going to leave it alone for now for a few years, or we tell them this is what the statute requires and so everybody understands. I don't care either way, but I just don't like the in-between, because then it's going to put people like saying, well, We can go this way or we can go that way. And I can just hear the attorneys going to the department and saying, my sales tax, though, is this, you know.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Kessler?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not disagreeing with my good friend on my left here. But yeah, he is definitely to my left. Anyway, I lost my train of thought, but I just, thank you, Mr.
All right. Is there any further questions on the amendment? Representative Smith?
Just a thought, for the next year, I don't think you got a huge problem because there's a lot of pennies, but as time goes, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. You're not going to even have a drawer for pennies anymore. So I think as time goes, we have to do what my friend from Wichita is looking at. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Sanders?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And isn't this eventually going to become a moot point because there's going to be a federal mandate or federal law about what to do?
There isn't at the moment. That's why we're addressing this. There is talk at the federal level, but until something gets passed, this is what we're stuck with. Representative Hoheisel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious if you would entertain, I think May issues, it becomes a problem for our financial institutions on this. They need a firm rule. I was wondering if we could hear possibly from somebody, a representative from a financial institution, if this actually hurts them. Because I think there may be an issue with the word may and what they're needing. So if that's.
Yes, I'd accept that if anybody wanted to address that. You may address the question if you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hoheisel, Kelly Vanswell with Kansas Bankers Association. We would need a firm rule in order for us to avoid a conversion or UDAP violation. So if it is may, or if there's no rule at all, we're going to just assume that we can't round up and we're always going to round in the customer's favor just to protect ourselves. If there's a firm rule with a shall, we can defer to that rule and follow that rule. So a policy decision on your end. But the may, I don't know if it will give the retailers any comfort, but we'll just have to act as if it isn't a rule at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing that, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry for voting against your amendment earlier.
All right, any further, Representative Kahar on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems to me that the change from shall to may would also give the retailers a little bit of cover so that if we did nothing at all, they can do whatever we want, whatever they choose. But if we enact this bill, they can still do whatever they choose. But if they have that irate customer who is going to call the police for 2 cents of theft, it kind of gives them a little bit of policy to use until federal or someone else puts something that shall be in place. Thank you.
Representative Helgerson?
Do you know when the implementation date is?
July 1st, I think, is
July
what
1st?
Representative Sawyer said.
Mr. Chairman, do we take substitute motions?
Yes, we have one motion to amend. You can have one substitute motion.
Okay. I would make a substitute motion that we make it shall and pass the bill out favorably. Or do you want to do it 2 separate motions? It would be passed out favorably, yeah. Passed out favorably, that's right.
It's already shall in the bill now.
As amended.
Yeah, it's already shall.
Okay, so the substitute motion, since it's already shall, would be
Pass it out favorably as amended.
kind of essentially calling the question is what we're doing here. So this is putting a stop to the debate. We're going to decide whether or not we're going to pass it out as it is with the amendments that have been on it. So, okay, so we did have a motion, a substitute motion, and a second from Representative Sawyer. This isn't a call of the question, so it is a debatable motion. Is there any discussion on this motion? Representative Kessler.
What's the crime or the penalty for a retailer not abiding by this? Let's say a retailer decides to round down into the customer's favor. It's clearly going to be against state law now. What's the penalties for that?
There's no penalty in the.
So the retailer would still be allowed to do whatever they want to do?
If they were rounding down in the customer's favor, they would just lose out on whatever the rounding up would have been.
So there really wouldn't be any penalty unless they got a tax audit and then they have to go through and start accounting for all of this. But, okay.
Any further discussion? Representative Howerton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was, it seems like the bank really wants it. The retailers don't. Is there any way, it's probably a revisor question, to separate this? I mean, the motion's already there, but to make it just for banking institutions, is there any way to do that? Because they're the ones that seem to really need this policy.
I don't know. That
Is that a whole nother bill? Or
well,
is
I'm
it?
just wondering if that really muddies the waters. And
Yeah.
I mean, we have one set of rules for one group of people and another set for.
I was thinking retailers could
others.
adopt the banking policy if they wanted to do this, and if they don't, then they could just be on their own. So that was my thought.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have an answer for that right now, but we've already got one substitute motion, so any further discussion? Betty? Seeing none, all those in favor of the substitute motion, say aye.
Aye.
Pardon?
The substitute motion says what?
The substitute motion is to leave it as shall, and we're passing out, recommending favorably for passage. So this will get the bill out of
Keep it
committee.
at shall and get the bill out, okay.
Yes, as amended, yeah. So, again, we had, I wasn't paying attention, I guess. All those in favor of the substitute motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
Division.
Division's been called. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. And all those opposed, please raise your hand. On a vote of 12-7, the motion carries. Okay, so we are done with that. It's been recommended favorably. At the risk of opening up another can of worms, we did have a bill that was referred back to committee. 2773 was single factor. We had an amendment on there that essentially treated all businesses the same. The underlying bill of 2773 had a carve out for in-state businesses to allow them to go to single factor, but yet the out-of-state businesses could still remain 3-factor. There was some contention from certain industries as that bill got passed out of committee. If there is any desire to go back to the original introduction as it was originally introduced on House Bill 2773, I would make a motion to reconsider the amendment that was added and go back to the original, and help me if I'm saying this wrong, but basically go back to the original bill. I'll make that motion if there's a desire. Second by Representative Helgerson. Is there any discussion?
Why?
Well, the version of the bill that we passed out was not seen as favorable by the people that make the decisions on running bills. So
Okay.
I, at the risk of not allowing, because if we don't make any changes, the one in-state business that testified would not be allowed to utilize single factor to benefit their business. So just trying to keep from penalizing or adversely affecting any in-state business that would have qualified.
So the business that is in-state is penalized the way we did it?
They don't get to receive the benefits of moving to single factor. I can't remember exactly what their adverse impact was. I didn't have that testimony reviewed, but they would allow them to receive the benefit of moving to single factor.
So we have to allow the out-of-state ones to go to single factor to allow the in-state one to go to single factor?
No. The original bill had some thresholds in it. I can't remember what those thresholds were, but basically, if you met those thresholds as an in-state business or as a business, you could move to single factor sales. The businesses that did not qualify, did not meet those thresholds, which is typically your out-of-state businesses because they don't have the payroll and the property pieces of the three factors. They just have the sales. They would not qualify, therefore they would be allowed to remain three factor as they are right now. If that's clear as mud.
I want to make sure that our in-state business is not punished by this deal. So you're saying what we passed last night punishes the in-state business?
No.
Right, that's what brought the bill up. So this is giving favorable status to one set of out-of-state businesses. Okay.
The underlying law, the way it is right now, if we don't pass this bill at all, any of the alcohol manufacturers are required to be three factor. They do not move to single factor. So we had an in-state business that requested to be able to move to single factor sales, and that was the premise of the bill. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just clarification, basically your motion is to strike the amendment. So a vote in affirmative would strike the amendment that was put on the other day. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
and I was trying to confirm with staff on exactly how I needed to do that to make a motion to reconsider.
But it gets us back to an affirmative of a yes vote gets us back to the base bill.
To the base bill,
Okay,
yes,
gotcha.
that's my understanding of what we needed to do
Gotcha.
in this
Thank you.
situation, so. Did I have a second on that yet? Okay, we did have a second, yes. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Opposed, no? Okay, now we're back on the bill and we need the original content of 2773. Is there any discussion? If not, is there a motion on moving the original bill? Representative Helgerson.
I move that we passed, it hasn't been amended, has it?
No.
Move the bill out favorably.
Okay, second from Representative Kessler. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right. At the risk of, no, I'm kidding. Yep. I owe everybody something next time, so. All right, thank you, committee. We are adjourned.